how we want to generate some force in the golf swing. This is power. So let's take a look from the ground up, utilizing Swing Titleist dual motion plates. And I'm standing on the plates right now with a lead side and a trail side. And you're going to see that my pressure is illustrated by a ball dancing back and forth. That's actually my pressure moving from side to side. And pressure is illustrated as a percentage of what's touching the ground at any given point. And you'll also see that there's heat mapping, that there are red spots where I'm pressing harder and blue spots where not quite as much, but still touching the ground. And an important thing about understanding your starting point with your pressure is where it is from side to side and heel to toe. And many times when we begin a pressure view of a golfer, we're going to look at how wide the centers of pressure in each foot are. Now, the stance width that you're seeing is really the distance between those two dots on each foot, the center of pressure. And you'll notice without me moving my feet, if I rolled my pressure further to the outside of my feet, my stance width got greater. And if I pinch my feet together, not changing my feet on the ground, my stance width got more narrow. So we're actually measuring the center of pressure between the feet. And there's a line that connects those two dots. And we call that a line of force. So I can only shift pressure between those 2 points. If I put pressure on my left toe and my right heel, notice I can only move pressure between those 2 points. And so no matter where you do put that line, that's the direction pressure will shift. You'll also notice that when I'm doing this motion, my body is not really doing a lot of moving, but the pressure is really dancing back and forth from foot to foot. This is pressure shift, not weight shift. So my mass of my body stays relatively centered, and I can move pressure easily from foot to foot. By changing my stance width, I change how far I can shift that pressure. When I get wider apart, I start to increase the magnitude of that shift. So understanding how your feet get positioned, where the centers of pressure under your feet are, and how we're moving pressure between those 2 points is a really important starting point for knowing about pressure in your swing. Some things that I see better players do with pressure in their stance is that they really get their feet connected to the ground. They don't get too dominant out towards their toes at their setup, and they don't get too dominant into their heels at the address position either. They really distribute the pressure evenly across their feet. And when they start to move, they really don't let pressure roll to the outside of the trail foot or get really deep into the trail heel or way out to the toe. They really keep a solid connection of that trail foot on the ground. So making sure that you're getting a really good base, a really good connection on the ground with your 2 feet is an essential starting point. And when you can, just stand in a normal position. And I want you to find where you can get that pressure right across the arches and evenly across both of your feet. You'll notice that it doesn't take any muscle activation to stand here. This is something we call skeletal alignment. The mass of your body is distributed through your skeletal system, and it doesn't take any energy to stand here. Now, move out towards your toes. And the further out you go, you're going to start to feel your muscles tensing up. You need that to keep you from falling over. That's not a good place to start your golf swing from. When you get into a good golf posture, you're going to feel both feet connected firmly to the ground, your centers of pressure nice and balanced, and your body in a relaxed starting position. I can't tell you how many players improve just by finding that they're too deep into their heels in the setup or way too far on their toes at the setup. And when we get into that middle position, things start to move much more easily and correctly. For many players who start in the studio, we begin with pressure and learn about how they're moving on the ground. A typical complaint from players when they come in is they're not hitting it far enough. They're not getting enough distance. And one thing I can see at the start of the golf swing, once we get their feet balanced and on the ground correctly, is if any pressure is moving. In other words, golfers that hit it short typically are very static, very still. Their center of pressure doesn't move, and they begin the backswing with their hands in the club. This nets a slower golf club, a slower club head speed, and therefore a shorter shot. Again, there are some shots in golf, like a putt or a chip, where you might want to start that way, but this is power, and this is how we want to generate some force in the golf swing. And the way we do that is what I see the best players who come into my studio do. They start with some movement, and they're using this position to get a little pressure shift from side to side. And this is an important characteristic to generate force and power. You've seen this in baseball, a batter at the plate using this pressure from side to side before they swing, or a tennis player on the baseline who's jogging back and forth to get ready to move where the ball comes. In golf, because the ball is static, it's not moving, doesn't mean that you have to be static. One thing I like to say is that we're settling into the shot, but we're not getting completely still. What I'd like to see is that when you set your feet, just get used to bouncing a little bit from side to side. This is an effect that I call jogging. And if you were to jog, your body would stay relatively centered as you move pressure from foot to foot. So jogging can happen in your golf setup. When your club goes down, we're just gently moving pressure from side to side. So as I settle and move a little pressure from foot to foot, I'm going to start pushing from my lead foot to the trail foot. And that gets the club going back a little faster. Making the club go back a little faster helps the mass of the club get further back, which gives it more time to accelerate to the ball. It also starts a great sequence. When my pressure leads the backswing, it's going to lead the downswing. And this little jogging motion is something that's so simple that you can apply to your golf swing, and it's going to give you more power and a lot better sequence in the golf swing.